Hello everyone and welcome to the Early Childhood Teachers Association webinar. Today's discussion is titled, What You Need to Know About ADHD and How to Get the Best Out of Your Students, presented by Paula Burgess. This webinar is live and interactive. You are encouraged to participate by posting questions to the presenter, which can be typed into the chat box located at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. All questions will be answered throughout and or at the end of the presentation. If you are experiencing difficulty hearing the sound during the webinar, please dial the 1-800 support number listed in the chat box. I'd now like to pass you over to Paula to begin.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Thanks for being here to learn more about our children with ADHD, as amazing as they are. So as Jordan said, my name is Paula Burgess and I am an ADHD coach and author, and I'm very passionate about ADHD and helping our kids to be the best that they can be. So why are you here today? Basically, obviously, you know, you're an educator and you just want to help our children with ADHD, probably just understand it a little bit more, understand how you can approach parents, maybe if you're sort of at that level where you're just seeing some signs of ADHD and you're just not really sure how to approach it or even support that child through the process. So I'm here to hopefully answer all of those questions for you and give you a better understanding of ADHD and give you some strategies to use for these amazing kids as well. So just a little note there, I've put that down. Is it really procrastination if I never even start it? But procrastination is such a huge thing when it comes to ADHD. So, you know, you sort of got to ask yourself that question. So what you're going to walk away with tonight from this webinar is you will understand the signs of ADHD. So if you're particularly working with the younger children, you might just start seeing these signs. You might start questioning, is there something there, or is it just normal childhood behaviour? Especially with boys, they can be boisterous, they can be hyperactive, and it's really hard to sort of know, is it something that's just normal, you've just got a really boisterous boy, or is it something that you need to sort of keep an eye on a little bit more. You'll know how you can get help parents, to get the help that they need. So it's a big minefield out there when it comes to ADHD, and parents a lot of the time aren't told sort of where to go or what to do, and as an educator, they're possibly asking you where to next. So it's really good for you to know where you can sort of point them in the right direction to help them along the way, because it is very much a maze, hence my business name, Beyond the Maze. Understand an importance of more so an early intervention rather than a diagnosis. There's a lot you can do without a particular diagnosis. If there's behaviours coming through that might indicate there might be some ADHD there, but there's no diagnosis, there's still a lot you can do before that actual diagnosis comes in. What reports you can offer as an educator to help the parents actually move forward, and when they go and see the paediatrician or any other specialist, what can you offer them to help that make an easier process for them, which in turn will make it easier for you because they're getting the right help a lot faster than if things are taking a little while to come through. What strategies you can implement into the classroom or in your group room, and most importantly, see how amazing these kids are. I just think these kids are incredible and they can really do amazing things and just be such great kids if they have the right support behind them. But just a little bit about my story. So you know where I've come from and my background. I have a child who is now 10, and that's my little boy there, and he's ADHD, and I have a stepson with ADHD. My husband's been diagnosed ADHD as well, and the dog down there, pretty sure he's ADHD as well. Basically, my son showed some signs at around the age of 3 or 4 that socially just wasn't quite fitting in with where he was supposed to be developmental-wise. And we were working with the daycare centre at the time and bringing in strategies, trying different things and seeing what would work for him. And things were being implemented. They were working for a little while, then they weren't being implemented, then they weren't working anymore, as is traditional with ADHD kids. Some things work for a little while, then they just won't work. So you're always on your toes. And it sort of got to the point where it was becoming too much for the particular centre we were with, and we got called in, excuse me, I got called in for the last time, so to speak, and he was actually asked to be removed from the centre. So effectively, I had a 4-year-old son that had been expelled from daycare. And of course, as you can imagine, that just sent my world into a huge turmoil. I was working full time, and all of a sudden, I didn't really have daycare. So I knew at that point that he was going to need support. If he was struggling with daycare, then he would struggle with school. So I spent the next 12 months building up a business of mine, which actually wasn't anything to do with ADHD, and went off and started my own business the same year he started school. But through that process, I actually found that I needed some support. So we actually trialled a different school. We had a school, we trialled a totally alternative school. We had a week's trial set in stone, and after 3 hours, they actually turned around and said to us, he's not welcome back, he's not suited to our school, see you later. So, of course, I went, oh, my goodness, what do I do now? Nobody seems to want this child. Nobody knows what to do with him, and we can't get things on track. So I went looking for some support for myself as a parent, and I just didn't find anything out there. So I started my own support group, and then I found myself with parents asking me for help. What do I do here, and what do I do there? And then that sort of just formed itself, and I thought, I need to study more about this here. And I considered doing psychology. I was actually warned against doing psychology. So I found an ADHD coaching course over in America that I could do online. So I spent the next 18 months actually studying to be an ADHD coach, so specialising just in ADHD. And basically that was a couple of years ago. And now what I do is I speak with parents, coaching the children themselves, and working with educators like you, a lot of daycare centres I'm in, and giving strategies and helping people work with these kids to be the amazing kids that they are. So that's where we are today. So I'm also authored 2 books and much more in my brain to come. So I've done Parenting a Child on the Spectrum. That's a book with I think there's about 15 or 20 authors altogether, all of our stories about having children on the spectrum. And my book there, Beyond the ADHD Label, is about our journey pretty much from about the age of 2 or 3 up to probably around about 7, and the strategies that we've used. And that's a really good book to actually, a lot of daycare centres have it in their centres to give to the parents, and because basically they're working with that really, really early time. And that's a really good book for the early time on when things are just starting to happen, for what strategies can be put in place. So let's get this thing started and get you guys some strategies. What are the signs of ADHD, first of all? So let's go through what we're looking for when we're ADHD. First of all, we'll chat about what's the difference between ADD and ADHD. So ADD is actually a term that was used many, many years ago, and medically speaking, it's not an actual term that is official anymore. So ADD used to be that one that was diagnosed if hyperactivity wasn't there. But now it's all under the ADHD banner, and there's 3 different types of ADHD, which is inattentive, hyperactive, and the combined type. And I'll go into those traits just in a second. But there's still a lot of term, and a lot of people still use that ADD term, and generally they're talking about it would be equivalent to inattentive ADHD because it doesn't have that hyperactivity. They're not sort of bouncing about the place. They might be daydreaming instead. So I just wanted to clarify that there really isn't a difference now. It's all just under ADHD. So first of all, what is hyperactive ADHD? So I call these little guys my Tasmanian devils because they're on the go all the time. They're just moving and moving and moving. So they do things like they fidget. They fidget with their hands, or they swim in their seat. So there's the ones in the classroom or the room that just can't sit still. They can't keep their hands off people. They just have to be moving all the time. They often leave their seat when remaining seated is expected, so that if they're listening, say, story time, or they have to be sitting there listening to something, they're probably the ones that are up walking around that you're constantly asking to sit back down. And it's okay, and one of the strategies, if they're not annoying anybody, obviously put some boundaries around it, but you will get much more out of them if you actually allow them to move in some way, shape or form. So if they're allowed to walk around the room, fantastic. If they can't and they distract people, let them sit on a chair and swing their feet or fiddle with something, but they have to move to engage their brain. So that's one of the most valuable things you can do for them. They're often running about or climbing excessively in situations which are inappropriate. So they're probably constantly going up the slide the wrong way, or they're hanging upside down off the bars, or just inappropriate things that really, other kids aren't particularly doing. We all know boys is particularly, and I do at this age tend to sort of go on the boys because the girls do sort of fly under the radar a little bit, and the boys present as that more hyperactive type anyway, a lot of the time, not all the time. So, when you're sort of looking at the boys, other boys are kind of following suit and doing what they're supposed to be doing, but these guys are sort of off doing what they want to do. They often have difficulty playing or engaging in leisure activities quietly. So they might be making lots of noise, or they have to smash things, or they might have to smash other people's things, and just they're sort of disrupting everything. They're often on the go or act as if they're driven by a motor, hence the Tasmanian devil. They just go and go and go and go. They often talk excessively and blurt out answers. So, for example, my sister and I, we live an hour away, and my son can talk from the moment we get in the car the entire way to my sister's place. So they just talk and talk and talk. So we need to distract them and give them something else to focus on when they do that. They often have difficulty waiting a turn. They might always need to be at the front of the line all the time, and they will struggle if they're not. So one of the things is if you give them an important job to do, or if you allow them to be at the front of the line, or any of those sort of scenarios where they don't have to wait as long, but they still have to be taught to wait a turn, obviously, but maybe not wait as long. And then you can expand on that. So you can do little bits at a time. And they often interrupt. They might go and butt into other children's games. They might see that a game isn't going the way that they think it should go, so they're very much the policeman as well, and they might go and interrupt and go, that's not the way you have to play it. So that can cause problems as well. So inattentive ADHD, these guys are called my Pooh Bears because they're a lot quieter. And a lot of girls will fall into this category, and they don't tend to be picked up until they do get into that school environment, because their schoolwork might be slipping back because they're just so quiet, and they tend to daydream a bit more. So they're not showing those big, boisterous bouncing about. Some girls are, absolutely, but not all the time. So they'll tend to fly under the radar a bit more. The inattentive ADHD they'll fail to pay attention, and they make careless mistakes. So you see, this is where it sort of starts coming through in the school environment, because educators will start seeing those little signs next to other kids. They often have problems staying on task. They're probably daydreaming. There's far more interesting things going on outside than what you're saying in front of the classroom. They don't seem to listen. So unless you can engage them, then they probably are finding there's probably a butterfly outside the window that's far more interesting than what you're saying in that classroom. So it's doing things like bringing them at the front of the classroom, using their name every now and then when you're talking to bring their attention back to you, and then finding out what they like and bringing things into play of what they like. So most kids at certain ages, they have particular things that they might like on TV, like Minecraft or PJ Masks or something like that. So there's things like that. Learning about those sorts of things where you can bring that into conversation will grab their attention back as well. They don't follow through on instructions. So they're just not, the same thing as if they're not listening. and they don't follow through on instructions. So it could be that you're giving them too many instructions and they can't process that. And I'll speak about that a little bit further on in this webinar as well. They get bored easily. So as I said, there might be a butterfly out the window and that's far more interesting than what you were saying, or something's on the floor that's grabbed their attention and they're just bored. And they forget things. So, you know, they're running out to their school bag 3 times because they've forgotten their drink bottle or they've forgotten their homework book or something like that. So that's very, very common. And then the combined type is pretty much those, the hyperactive and the inattentive put together. So they must have a mix of both those traits, and it is the most commonly diagnosed trait of ADHD. And usually to get the combined type, they usually have 6 of each, so 6 of the hyperactive traits and 6 of the inattentive traits to be diagnosed that combined type. So as you can see, I like to call these guys our tickers, because obviously when you think of ticker, he's not always jumping up and down and on the go all the time, but he can get there, so he can get that bouncy, bouncy, bouncy effect to him. They can be impulsive, so they just don't think of things. And these guys are the ones that generally are getting into trouble for the hitting or kicking or punching, because they get in that mindset that someone's not doing something the way that they think it should definitely go, and then their reaction is to just maybe hit someone or kick someone or something like that. So that's where they can get into a lot of trouble because they haven't got their impulsivity under control. I can tell you it does get better, but when they're younger, it does take a little bit of time and coaching through to get it right. And I do give you some questions at the end of this to ask some children to help them think about these things as well. Of course, they're hyperactive as well, and they can be disorganised. So their desks are an absolute mess, or their bags or their little pigeonholes or whatever you use, it's just a disaster, more so than most kids. So it's important to remember that ADHD is an executive function disorder. It's not a behavioural disorder. And this is really, really important because a lot of the time, these kids with ADHD are seen for their behaviours. They're judged on their behaviours, and a lot of the time behaviours mask what they really, really want. And yes, behaviours absolutely have to be managed because, you know, you've got other children in those rooms that you can't just be letting one child get away with things. And we all understand that, but then it's important to also remember how their brains are ticking over and how they're thinking to make them react with that behaviour. So it's the behaviour that's actually coming out as a result of the way they're thinking and what's happening for them behind the scenes. So I often tell my parents when I'm working with them, when children are getting suspended from school or the teachers come to them and said, you know, little Johnny's hit someone today, ask the teachers what's happened before that. Obviously, there has to be a consequence for the behaviour, most absolutely 100%, but ask what's happened before that. So getting to understand what's happened in the lead up to that, we can work around strategies to get the children to think differently so that doesn't happen. So working on their executive function so it doesn't happen in the future, and just building strategies for them as a go-to rather than the go-to is hitting someone. So when you're thinking around that, it's not a behavioural disorder, it's an executive function disorder. It does make you see things in a different light. The behaviour is just a reaction to that. So what's the difference between normal childhood behaviour versus possible ADHD? As I was saying before, if you have a boy that's quite boisterous and outgoing, then you could just sit there going, is this boy behaviour or is this actually ADHD? So the ways you can do this, so obviously all children can show this from time to time, and when you look at all those traits, some of you are probably sitting there going, well, this could be me. And I hear this quite a lot, but a lot of the time, you know, ADHD is more regular. It happens probably on a daily basis, something of that comes out. And if you really step back and go, if this happens to me every single day, if you say yes, then get it checked out. If it doesn't happen every day and you're in control of it all, then probably not. The behaviour is excessive for their age. So if you've got, you know, the younger ones, say they you know, some of them go through that biting phase. But if they're still biting in prep or year one, then obviously something's going on. You know, my son was biting well into year one, which obviously wasn't acceptable. So it's things like that you're sort of going, you know, they should be out of that stage now. So there's something there that's not. And of course, these behaviours can be showing for more than 6 months. So as an educator, it's also then, as you would know, important to understand what's happening in the family as well, because if there's trauma there or there's abuse there or anything happening behind the scenes, then it can present these behaviours that also look like something like ADHD. And it may not be, it might just be something in the background that's happening at home that needs to be addressed by a psychologist or a counsellor or a chaplain or something like that, whatever you've got at your fingertips in the school system. So it's important to kind of get what's going on for them. And as I said, I've got questions at the end you can ask children, which might pull some of this information out as well. But if nothing is there and those behaviours are showing through and they're sort of consistent over the past 6 months, then it's worth getting it checked on. But if you've had a child that maybe has just had a bad week and those behaviours are there, but the next couple of weeks, nothing's really showing through, possibly not ADHD, could be something else, may not be ADHD, but there's plenty of other things that come along with it, as you would know, with all the other diagnoses that are out there for children. So what are some commonly coexisting conditions? So in the medical term, it's called comorbid, and I don't like that. I like coexisting conditions. So basically, what else comes with ADHD is oppositional defiance disorder. ADHD rarely comes by itself. I've come across one person in my whole time that has actually had ADHD by itself. But as we spoke about it more, we actually saw she was going back to the doctor to see if anxiety was in there as well. So it just sounded like there was something else there. But a lot of the time, ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, and ADHD can actually cross over quite a lot. And sometimes they might get an ODD diagnosis and later on it might change to ADHD and vice versa. So it really, a lot of those traits are similar and they can show through and it might look like the other one. SPD is a sensory processing disorder. So if you have ADHD and sensory processing disorder together, it can look very much like autism. So because you've got the sensory stuff there, which is a lot of the autistic traits in children. So when you've got those sorts of things together, it can sometimes present, and you can get that unsure, being unsure with the paediatrician even, and he might diagnose ADHD and SPD first, which they tend to not go straight down the ASD road, and then maybe later on they might get an ASD diagnosis. So it's really, a lot of them are similar. Depression. So depression can sink in because these kids are seeing that they're different to other children, and it's important to embrace those differences and see what, get them to see what's great about them being different. So using examples about who else is different in the world and what amazing things they've done. Different things like that. So if you've got a little bit, the primary school, older primary school children, they're probably getting into Minecraft. They're probably watching YouTube. So you've got your people like, I think it's Dan TM, a lot of these younger kids, about 7 up, about 7 up are watching. So, you can use examples to that. Look what they've done. They're different, all that sort of thing. If it's not embraced, then depression and ADHD, there's a high suicide rate in ADHD kids because they do feel so different and so they can slip through the cracks. So it's important to get this at this really young age and really try and mould that embracing differences. They can definitely be gifted. It can go from one extreme to the other. Bipolar is also one. So recently I was at a conference in the States, and there was a psychiatrist who was doing a study for her thesis about bipolar and ADHD, and there were some very strong links to bipolar being diagnosed a little later, so teenage years plus, and when they're younger they were ADHD, so it's almost like it's sort of bipolar sort of showing through as they're older, and especially if bipolar is like a background in the family, so somebody in the family's got it, there's a much higher instance that bipolar might be diagnosed, especially if ADHD has been diagnosed. Tourette's is becoming more and more common. Not sure why that is, but it just is. Whether they know more about it, maybe, and it's showing a lot more, not sure. And then the other side of that, gifted, is learning difficulties. So they can definitely be struggling with things. Basically, the maturity level of someone with ADHD can be up to 3 years behind their peers. So if they're working on that, if you've got a 7-year-old that's working at a 4-year-old level, there could be and learning difficulties in there. That's some huge struggles for them. So I've worked with parents who are working with me for their 7-year-old children, and they might have a 4-year-old sibling, and they're like, my 4-year-old's more mature than my 7-year-old, and that's so common. So thinking about that, learning difficulties, adding a whole nother layer to ADHD. And dyslexia, so that's another one that's becoming a lot more common as well. I think it's probably a little bit more understood in schools, which is probably why it's been picked up more as well, which is great, because if it's picked up, then it's early intervention, it's getting addressed, which I think is fabulous. Anxiety. So if ADHD doesn't come with anything else, it's probably going to come with anxiety. And that's why I say ADHD would rarely come by itself. It will probably at least come with anxiety. And then OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder. And then the big one is, of course, ASD. So it's very common that autism spectrum disorder and ADHD are together. So 80%, the recent stats on that is 80% of ASD children will have ADHD traits, if not diagnosed ADHD. And the kids with ADHD, 50% of those will have ASD traits. So a lot of the time, this is why you might get a child that's diagnosed ADHD, and a couple of years later, they'll get an ASD diagnosis as well. So as you can see, it's tough. It's really tough when you're looking at all of those different diagnoses as well. And some of these kids have 3 or 4 of these. It's just really, and there's obviously a lot more than just this. As well, there's some newer ones coming on the scene now that they can't really fit into these boxes. So they've got some newer ones out there that are becoming more and more as well. So it's tough for these kids to kind of function in an environment where they need to kind of be listening and hearing what's being said. So what's some fake stuff about ADHD, just so we can blow those theories out of the water? It's not caused from bad parenting. It's not caused from family problems. Some of the behaviours from family problems can show like ADHD, but it won't be ADHD necessarily. Bad teachers, so all you guys are off the hook. You won't cause ADHD at all. Too much sugar. Obviously, too much sugar can result in some certain behaviours, but it doesn't cause ADHD. Gluten intolerance doesn't cause ADHD either. Same thing. It can affect some behaviours for sure. I mean, all food affects the way the brain functions. Absolutely. So there might be things in food that actually trigger certain functions of the brain which show behaviours that show as ADHD, but it's not an underlying cause of ADHD. Not caused from bad diet, same as I said with food, not caused by too much TV, and it's not caused from a lack of discipline. Obviously, all of those things can result in the behaviours that might show as ADHD. When you're talking about an ADHD diagnosis itself, none of those are the cause of the ADHD diagnosis itself. So what are some facts about ADHD? You're looking at about 1 to 2 children per classroom that has ADHD or probably has those traits and may not be diagnosed yet. So that's quite a high rate. And, you know, for you guys as educators, you've got a challenge ahead of you. Trying to do the best thing for these kids and dealing with all the other diagnoses as well in your classroom is huge. It is a neurological condition, so it's actually a chemical imbalance in the brain, which I think I've put here. And basically they don't grow out of it, and it can't be cured, just treated. And honestly, you know, I've been living in the ADHD space for a while. I wouldn't want a cure. I think it's pretty amazing when you work with it. So yeah, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. So the neural pathways are just firing differently to what a neurotypical brain will be firing. It can be genetic, not all the time, but it can be genetic. And unfortunately for dads, it generally, but not all the time again, comes down from the dad. I see so many dads that get diagnosed after their children are diagnosed. They've gone through the process with their child, and then all of a sudden they've gone, oh, that's me. And they go down that road for themselves, and they find that they have ADHD as well. So it's quite common. So not only when you're working with the children in the classroom, if you're relating information back to the parents, then think about it in the way that you could be talking to parents with ADHD as well. So that puts a whole different way on how you could be approaching things with parents also. So what do you do if you suspect that one of your children in your classroom have ADHD? So first of all, you know, you have to have a chat with parents, obviously. Now, I always say that, you know, you can't help those who don't want to be helped. And if you're going to come up against stuff all the time for parents, where parents are just looking out, they don't want to hear it, they don't want to know about it, unfortunately, there's nothing much you can do in the case of getting a diagnosis. But what you can do in the classroom is implement the strategies in the classroom to hopefully make it better for you in the classroom. Ideally, you want those parents on board with you, and you want them to actually help on their end as well as you, because that would make it easier for the classroom as well. So, you know, that's sort of what you've got to do. But if you're at the school, parents don't want to know about it, it's talking with the other teachers, bringing in whatever resources you can bring. So, you know, if your school or centre has an occupational therapist, trying to get them into those sessions, getting the learning support team on side to help out kids, getting a counsellor involved or a chaplain or whoever you've got at your fingertips. So using as much resources as you can to what your school can provide, as much as you can do, I guess, without the parents sort of needing to be involved. Obviously, you can keep them informed, but yeah, some of them, especially with ADHD gets such a bad rap, and a lot of people are scared of getting an ADHD diagnosis because it does such a bad reputation. But we're working on, you know, people like us in coaching, we're working on, you know, reducing that stigma. Every time we see a stigma come out, we are on it really fast and getting those things corrected so we can reduce the stigma around ADHD. So hopefully that makes your job easier to be able to approach this with parents as well and get the help that you guys need from the parents. So generally, you know, the process is, so you know, the process for this is you actually, generally the parents will go to a doctor first. So you got a parent on board, you're talking to them, you're not using the terms ADHD because obviously nobody can diagnose except a pediatrician or a psychiatrist. But, you know, you're talking about possibly behavioural issues or distraction or daydreaming or something like that. So you want to be bringing up some traits that are there. And generally the first stop is that they will go and see a pediatrician, their GP, and that GP will generally send them to a pediatrician. Now, a lot of the time I'll actually tell people to try and get a child psychiatrist instead of a pediatrician. And depending on if they're going private or public, if they're going private, they could probably be able to ask for a psychiatrist. If they're going public, unfortunately, they can only go to a pediatrician. And the reason why I do that is because the wait list is smaller for a child psychiatrist. A child psychiatrist can still medicate if they want to medicate, and they still do all the same things, probably a little bit more involved because the psychiatrist is working more of the brain function and the mental health side of things, whereas a pediatrician is the doctor specialising in children. So they're looking at the science of it and the medication side of it and all of that. So at least with a psychiatrist, you're kind of getting a bit more of a sort of a wider focus. But either or, and they will then give a diagnosis. And basically, you know, what you can do for that. So when you're talking to the parents, what you can do for that is providing them reports. So when they go to even the GP, that the GP will probably ask for more information anyway. But when they're ready to, when they come back and say to you, okay, we've got a pediatrician appointment, what can you give me to help me? What you can do is give them as much information as possible. Some GPs will give them a tick and click checklist for them as parents to fill out and you as educators to fill out. And so you can do that. But what I'd also do for you guys is just write some sort of report. Voice your concerns, the main things that are happening, put it in, like, you know, write a letter or a report as such, and put the main parts in bullet point, because that's going to be looked at a lot quicker. And your pediatricians and psychiatrists are busy and they're just probably not going to read everything. They're going to glance over it. So we need to make those points really, really particular. So, you know, like, talk about the effect on their social environment. So are they making friends? If they have friends, what's that dynamic like? How is it affecting their schoolwork? What would you like to see happen? You know, so giving your views on what you would like to see happen. Do you want some, you know, do you think that maybe they should be talking to a psychologist, or do you think you need strategies for the classroom, so therefore they would need maybe an occupational therapist or a coach? Do you think, I know you've got to be very careful around the medication, but, you know, is medication something that you and the parents might like to explore? Because that's something as an educator you need to do with the parents as well, because you constantly need to give them feedback on how that medication is working. So some medication will work straight away, some takes a little while, and some doesn't work at all. Some actually makes it 10 times worse than the behaviours you were getting in the classroom. So you can have really huge different effects around medication. So it's important to keep all of those communications open and giving the parents as much information as possible when they go to those specialists to get that information quickly. And the more information we give to those specialists, it will probably make the diagnosis process a lot faster as well, which is good, because sometimes it can take ages to get it. And that said, it's also, you know, you can talk to the parents if they're asking you, where do I go for help? They don't need a diagnosis to come to, well, myself being a coach, or a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or an occupational therapist. We can work with those three people just based on the behaviours that are happening and what's affecting school life. So obviously you need, in order for them to get a Medicare rebate, they will need a doctor's referral for an OT or a psychologist to be able to get the Medicare rebate, but they don't need a diagnosis. So there's stuff that can be put in place before they actually go and get that diagnosis. And the same thing, you guys can just offer them a report with what the behaviour is that's concerning you. So there's a lot that can be done before a diagnosis comes through and makes a huge impact on these kids as well. And that leads us into why early intervention is so important. And you probably know this as educators, the quicker we can get onto things, the better. And I can honestly say my son is a true testament of that. You know, we jumped on this when he was 3 or 4 years old. He's now thriving in school as a 10-year-old and absolutely loving it. We've got strategies in place. He's making good choices. But, you know, I'm not saying everything's perfect, but it's a lot better than it was when he was being suspended back in prep constantly. So, you know, we jumped on this fast. So the quicker we can get on these things, be able to get parents involved, and this is why I bring up that they can go to psychologists, they can go to occupational therapists, they can go to coaches without these formal diagnoses. And in fact, sometimes it actually helps if they go to them before they go to the pediatrician, because a psychologist and an occupational therapist, and I guess as a coach as well, we can give those reports to the parents also on what we're seeing, which will just back up what you're seeing. And then when they go to the pediatrician, they've got even more information. And I know some pediatricians even use coaches and psychologists to actually bring those reports in before they'll give a diagnosis. So they're so busy and they haven't got a lot of time in their practices. So they use other people who will spend an hour or half an hour with them, and then we give them a report and say, well, this is what we're seeing, and based on that and what comes from the school and what's coming from the parent, then the pediatrician or psychiatrist will go, right, okay, this is what I think it is. So it's hugely beneficial to jump on it as soon as you see something and you're pretty sure that there's something else different there that shouldn't be there based on the development stages that the kids should be at. So what support is available? So I did touch on a few. There's a bit more here just so you know for the parents. So as I said, first of all would be the first port of call is the family doctor. And I always say to the parents, and this is something you can say to them as well, is make sure they've got a really good relationship, because this doctor is going to be the one that gives them all those referrals, everything that they need, they're going to need from that family doctor. Pediatricians, so they play a very important role, obviously. They're going to do the diagnosis, they can medicate if they need to medicate, and then obviously they need to monitor that medication as well to see what's happening. And of course a psychologist, a psychiatrist, which I've just touched on before. So obviously a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who can diagnose and medicate, so give prescriptions, and a psychologist can't do that. So they're not actually, they can't officially diagnose, they can't officially medicate either. So they usually give the reports to the pediatrician, so the pediatrician uses their reports to diagnose, which I think is funny, but anyway. A dietitian nutritionist. So I'm a huge advocate that I think diet has a big part to play. As I said, food affects the way the brain functions, and it can most definitely, you can get certain behaviours on food sensitivities, and they can also sometimes present as ADHD. So, and it may not be, it might be a food sensitivity that's showing certain behaviours that are showing as ADHD. So it's a really interesting process to do, and it's really handy to have that on board as well. Of course, an ADHD coach, so what I do is basically I work with the parents and the children themselves, and as I said, I work with educators as well in various ways, and we work on things that are happening at the moment. So we have parents that might come to me and say, right, this is not working for us in school, what's some things we can do? And we sit there and we talk about, I ask questions around what's worked in the past, what may not have worked in the past, what's working for them now, and then we just work through things by just asking questions, and we end up getting a strategy at the end of it that they can walk away with and implement. And it's something that we've worked on together, and then if it's something in a classroom, they'll bring that back to you guys and then go, right, this is what we're going to try now, and implement that. And then you can give them feedback on how it's working on your end. And then when they come back to me, they give me feedback, go, that didn't work at all. And we go, right, okay, let's focus on why that didn't work. What was going wrong? So it's really important that we go through all of that. Or we go, yes, that worked. Great, we've had a win, but we know it's only going to be for the short term, most likely. And we'll keep that in mind, that worked. So next time we need to put another strategy in, we'll think what worked about that, and we'll pull what worked about that into another strategy. And the same thing, I do the same thing with educators. So I come to schools and daycares, we can talk about particular children, and we can pull some strategies around those particular children as well. So it's the same sort of scenario. As I said, there's only about 15 of us in Australia. There's a lot in America, but we're certainly growing over here, and I think it's awesome. Of course, the learning support teacher, they could play a huge part in this for sure. And you guys as educators are a massive support to help out, and then just doing what needs to be done in the classroom. Occupational therapist. So an occupational therapist can really help with the social emotional side of things as well. They can help with if there's any motor skill issues. They can help with all of that. And that's another specialist that they can see without a diagnosis as well. They can just be treating all the behaviour or any issues that are coming out for them. And a naturopath, some people want to go down that natural road. A lot of people don't want to try medication. And as the most advice I can give you as a parent and to a teacher is suggest if you think medication, I know sometimes you think, yep, medication is the way to go, suggest it, but don't pressure it. There are some schools out there that do pressure it, and it's really such a tough choice for medication. It's certainly not for most parents the one and only thing that they want to do. And it's a hard choice to do. And if they do it, fantastic, they'll give it a go. It may not work. It might be 3 different types of medication I need to try before it actually gets there. Sometimes it's a really bumpy road to get medication to actually work. Sometimes it works straight away, which is awesome. And sometimes, as I said, it doesn't work at all. So it's important to be that support network and not letting the parents feel like they're pressured to get this right, because medication can be really tough. Animal therapy. So if you've got a really great centre or school where you can have an animal, it'd be awesome. I think, you know, every centre or school should have an animal of some sort, whether it's a fish or, you know, a dog would be ideal, but not necessarily suitable in schools. Guinea pigs are, chooks are, and a lot of kids really respond really well to that. I know a few schools have chooks and they do a bit of a like agriculture type program, and the kids love it. They when I work with kids, they're like, my school has chooks, and they just love going out, talking to the chooks. And the reason why animal therapy works so well is because these kids struggle to make friends. So the animals a lot of the time can be their friends. So, excuse me. So yeah, it's really handy to have that. The reason why I put this photo up is I think these kids are world changers. They really are. They're out of the box thinkers. They just think entirely differently to us. You know, have a full-on conversation with them and you just think, wow, where did that come from? And they really are changing the way the world is. They're changing the school system. You know, we all have to adapt now as educators as well. We have to change the way we teach, the way we interact with kids now, because of these kids coming through with these different diagnoses. It's not like, you know, when we went to school, it was just very one size fits all. That's the way it had to be. Now the school system has to adjust. It's still got a long way to go, obviously, we all know that, but it's getting there. It's starting, and it's been starting for a little while. So it's to cater for these types of kids, and they are changing the way things are. You think of all these different things that are coming out now, and a lot of these kids are probably the kids that didn't fit that mold. So it's really quite amazing. So I'm about to hit some strategies, so don't worry, they are coming. But I just wanted to go through and show you some successful people with ADHD, so you've got something to compare to, so you can see what these kids are actually quite capable of. So you've got Sir Richard Branson, who's ADHD and also dyslexic. So you think about what he's done. Walt Disney was always told he had his head in the clouds and was never going to amount to anything. And he's ADHD. So Channing Tatum, everybody loves this one, Channing Tatum. And, you know, think about what he's done. And Jim Carrey, everybody can see that one. You can definitely see the ADHD in Jim Carrey, but he's a pretty amazing guy, that's for sure. Albert Einstein, John F. Kennedy, Paris Hilton, Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps. So Michael Phelps is the American swimmer, Olympic swimmer. And he quite often talks about the support that he's received through his ADHD has helped him achieve get to where he is today. Justin Timberlake, Will Smith, Justin Bieber, Mary-Kate Olsen, Emma Watson, Britney Spears, and Liv Tyler. So you can see, you know, these people sort of taken what they love doing and what they can hyper-focus on, for want of a better word, and really just take that and make something of themselves. And I'm sure all of these people have struggled through life and told that they can't do anything, they can't focus properly, all of that sort of thing, and heard all of that negative, but somewhere along the line, they've received what they needed to receive to get to where they are today. So it's pretty amazing what people can do. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other people with ADHD as well, as you can imagine. So I just want to quickly go through the meltdowns versus tantrums, because I'm actually quite surprised at how many people don't really know the difference. So a meltdown is almost like a sensory overload, and there's really nothing you can do when the kids are in meltdown mode. It's just a matter of keeping them safe, putting them in a separate room, or just, you know, not even distracting them, but keep just making sure that they're safe, because they can go into, this is where they might throw things, and they just don't know how to control themselves. Their body's out of control. Their brain and their body are not in sync, and they just don't know how to cope with it. So it's important to just let them ride it out, as long as obviously you've got to keep other children safe, but ride it out as much as they can wherever they can, and then talk to them about that later. And helping them manage that, helping them manage what led up to the meltdown. So it's identifying those signs, and you as educators identifying what led up to that meltdown, and then getting to know what's going to trigger that down the track as well. So when you start seeing once you start getting to know the child, you'll start seeing that behaviour escalate and go, oh, hang on, we're going to go into meltdown mode soon. So it's then bypassing that by giving them something else. And obviously a tantrum is, you know, think about the child at the shopping aisle that wants a chocolate and mum said no. And if they all of a sudden they just throw themselves on the floor and mum says, oh yeah, you can have that, that tantrum will stop almost immediately. A meltdown won't stop regardless. So a meltdown, you know, it can be the same thing. It can be the same thing about a meltdown may be triggered by them not being allowed to have that chocolate at the aisle, but there's stuff that's happened around that. There might be this sensory overload where, you know, they've come home from school, it's been a huge day at school, mum's taken to the grocery shop, and there's a lot of sound, there's a lot of light, there's a lot of people, and then the final straw is not being allowed to do something. So that's the same in the classroom. You could have a really busy day in the classroom, and if the child's just being, they just are not being very cooperative, and they throw a tantrum, and you all of a sudden go, yep, that's fine, you can do that now, and they stop, then it's definitely a tantrum. But that meltdown, think about what's happened before it, and think, okay, it is pretty noisy in here. We have had a lot going on today. We've moved classes a lot because they like that structure. We've moved classes a lot. We might have been art class over there. We might have had sports. Things are going on. So, okay, yep, that probably is a meltdown, and just letting them ride that out. So it is important to know the difference between the two, because the difference between the two are treated differently as well. Because if it's a tantrum, obviously the consequence has to be there for that. And if it's a meltdown, then it's talking to them around how to control that better so it doesn't lead into a meltdown, rather than just having a consequence for both of those things. So here we go, the much awaited strategies that I know you all are waiting for, and the most favourite part, I know, with all educators. So what are some strategies you bring into the room? So first of all, make it simple as possible. So this is where the executive function comes in. It needs to be very simple. So when you're giving instructions, you know, one of the traits earlier was that these children don't follow, you know, may not follow instructions. And as I said, it could be because these instructions are given, there's too many instructions. So we need to keep it to 1 or 2 instructions. That is it. And so we can't be rattling off, you know, go and take your books out, open your books, or let's say, okay, go over to your pigeonhole, grab your book out, come back to your desk, open it up, sit down, get your pen out, write, and they're like, well, hang on a minute, you just told me to go and get my book. That's what I'm trying to process right now. So it's important to keep it simple. Just say, go to the pigeonhole, get your book, and then they'll naturally transition back to the desk. Or go and get your book, come back to your desk. You know, making those really, really simple. And you'll get a lot more out of them that way to actually move forward because they're not trying to remember and overload their brain of all of those things that you've just told them to do. So sometimes that doesn't always work. It's just not, you might be in a hurry. There might be a lot of other things going on. So give those instructions in order. So I wouldn't go any more than 3 instructions if you can help it. Bare basics 1 or 2, but no more than 3. As you're heading up into the age of probably 7+, you could probably move to that 3. But at this younger age, 1 if you can, or 2, and give them in order. So things like, prime example, go put your shoes and socks on. So go and put your socks on, then put your shoes on. I mean, that's natural anyway. You think that might be quite a common thing, but sometimes even that, if there's a lot of stuff going on, they go, what did you ask me to do? Oh, that's right. So it's those sorts of things, giving those instructions in order on how to do things as well. It makes a huge difference to these kids. So having movement breaks, this is probably, if you don't do anything else, this is like one of the most valuable things that you can do. And it's allowing the children to move, and moving, walking around the classroom, as I said before, if they don't distract any children. So putting those boundaries around it, saying things like, I understand that you need to move your body, and that's fine. You can get up and you can walk around, but if you annoy people or interrupt or distract anybody, then that privilege is gone. So it's putting those boundaries around that, and I don't feel they're ever too young to understand that. It's if you're consistent with that, it eventually sinks in. It takes a while, obviously, for the younger ones, but once they learn that, it will start sinking in. So it's doing those sorts of things. If you can't let them walk around, allowing them to be able to move their legs, so swinging their legs, they won't keep still. A lot of the time, I hear it all the time. Everybody's keep still, sit down, keep still. And they can't. They absolutely can't. Their brain just does not let them sit still. So they have to fidget. And as crazy as that might drive you, which I can tell you, it drives me mad when I'm sitting down. My son's got one of those wobble chairs that allows him to move. Those chairs drive me crazy because constantly I'm seeing him out of the corner of my eye moving, and I just want him to keep still. And this is where I keep reminding myself he can't keep still. It's not possible. His brain's not letting him keep still. So if you can remind yourself of that, then it's less likely that you'll be harping on them all the time. Sit still, don't move, all of this, because they need to. They absolutely need to move. And you will get the best out of them if you can figure out a way that you can let them move, because it engages their brain. It switches on that brain when their body's moving. So finding out what interests them. So as I said before, really understanding, what kids at the age level you've got, what they're like. So what are the trends in that age? Whether it's PJ Masks or Thomas the Tank or Minecraft or Fortnite, God forbid. Anything like that these days that, is really getting them. So take the time to find out a little bit about that. You don't have to be an expert on it. And if you want to be, just ask them. They'll tell you. They will absolutely tell you all about it. So taking just little points of that and keeping them like in your storage banks in your brain and using those things. So if you're finding that they're not engaging in the classroom and you need to have a discussion around a certain topic, how can you make that topic into something that interests them and will grab their attention? And then the only thing is you might have the opposite side of that is they'll start interrupting you because they want to tell you everything. So you've got to basically find that interest to get their engagement. And as I said before, calling out their name, having them at the front of the room. Never put a child with ADHD at the back of the room. And even possibly, at least at the front of the room, you can see what they're doing. You can make eye contact with them. You could get down to their level. Putting them at the side of you, even rubbing their back when they're to calm them down as well. If you've got parade, like assembly is the most boring thing ever for these kids. and I've seen lots of teachers do it, which I think is fabulous, and they've done it to my son, is just have them sit beside them at parade and just rub their back, and it calms them down. If they like being touched, if they've got sensory issues, obviously that's not something that's there, that's available to them. So, and allow those sensory aids. So fidget spinners, waste of time. They just went crazy on those fidget spinners, and they really they weren't the greatest. They were great for these kids, but then of course, because the other kids wanted them, they just sort of threw the ability of the kids that needed them out. So what I say is that little pink and white thing is a fidget cube. They are super cool. So they've got the little pink thing on the top there. You can actually put your thumb on that and move that around. The 5 buttons there, you push them in. The silver button there rolls around, and the dial is just like one of those locks, those dial locks or whatever you call them. Is that, and then the other side is just a sensory texture thing, and the other side of that is a clicker. I think it clicks, which is, I'm a clicker, and I know I annoy people when I click it. So that's probably not ideal, the clicker part for the classroom, but again, you can put boundaries around that. And those little spinners down the bottom, so the blue and orange things and the green and pink things, they're really cool. So you can get them off eBay or occupational therapist or someone who sells sensory items. And they're really good when children are getting overworked. So you might see anxiety starting to kick in, which could lead to a meltdown. They're super cool to give them one of those, because what they do is they actually, the little thing that sits up the top of it, you actually blow on that and it spirals down the bottom, and then you just turn it upside down and you do it again. And the whole idea with that is they have to take breaths in and breathe out. But it's a fun way to do it. And when they're doing that breathing in and breathing out, it's actually calming their brain down, and it's diverting their chance of them having a meltdown as well. So having a couple of those, and they're not much money, I think only a couple of bucks. So having a couple of those in your little kit and giving them, even if you can't get them, get a balloon or something like that where they can just purposely breathe in and breathe out, and getting them to settle down. And of course, then those little things at the top that look like the caterpillar and the bendy man and the stress balls, all those sorts of things are really good as well, just to let them fiddle with in the classroom. Putty is also another little Play-Doh, allowing them to have a piece of Play-Doh or a putty. Another good thing for particularly the classroom is going to Kmart and just getting a packet of 3 of those stretchy bands that like personal trainers use or boxing people use. They literally just stretch. I think they're like $3 for a packet, and tie them in the bottom of the chairs and let the kids flip their feet on it. Now, sometimes that can, and some of these sensory aids can, unfortunately, be used inappropriately, like they might throw it at people, or those bands, they might flick them at people. But it's, yeah, like everything, putting the boundaries around it, and then if that happens, it's taken away. And really getting them to see the benefit of these things, asking them how it makes them feel. What are they getting from that? Do they feel calmer? And that's helping them understand how it's affecting them, and it's helping you understand as well how it's benefiting them also. So those, just allowing those sensory aids can make a massive difference. So the working memory and executive function pretty much go together. So working memory is that the reason why I say you don't make those instructions simple. So it's thinking about, like if you're rattling off 5 or 6 instructions, their working memory is just not where it should be. So they're thinking about that first instruction on what you've given them, and their working memory cannot deal with all those other instructions. So they can't work that out. And that might be why, it's nothing like, for example, my son, I'll tell him to go do something and he'll get halfway up the hallway and go, what am I doing again? Oh my God, just do it. And sometimes I've made it simple, or sometimes I've stepped back and gone, you know what, I didn't make it that simple, and that's why he's asking me that question. So it's just remembering that that's the way the brain works. This is the way the memory needs to work, and giving the structure as simple as you can. And allowing, and probably again a really important thing, is having that growth mindset and limiting beliefs. So a lot of people don't know what the limiting beliefs are. So I'll quickly go on that. So it's things like, you know, these kids hear a lot of negative stuff, and they'll be saying things like, I'm dumb, I can't do it, I don't know how to do it, that's just silly, and things like that all the time. They're hearing that from other people, and they're telling them to themselves. So their limiting beliefs are that they are dumb, so they can't do it. You know, and they're going, well, I can't do that because I'm dumb. So that's a limiting belief. But if we have a growth mindset, we're going, well, you might have told me I can do that, but I know I can do that, so I'm going to go do that. So it's bringing that information into them and showing them examples of how they can do it and getting that brain to work out how they can do it. So it's things like, you know, for example, you go and buy a new car and you're looking at a few new cars. So let's say a Mazda, for example, and you've gone, okay, I'm going to go and buy, let's say, Mazda 3 because they're very popular, a Mazda 3, and you've looked at a few Mazda 3s on the website, you've gone to the car yard, you've looked at a few. How many Mazda 3s do you all of a sudden see on the road? You see it almost like every second car is a Mazda 3. And that's because you've brought that to your attention. There's no more extra Mazda 3s on the road since you started thinking about it. It's just because your brain now has that in its mind and it's thinking about it, and it's now looking for evidence to show you all of those Mazda 3s. So if you've got a child telling themselves that they're dumb and they can't do something, then their brain is searching for evidence for that to show them that is why they are dumb and that is why they can't do it. Whereas if we change that thinking and build a new neural pathway to get them to say, I can do that and this is how I can do it, and the more we tell them that and give them that growth mindset, the more their brain will start searching for that evidence as to why they can do it. And then it's up to educators and parents to then go, well, this is why you can do that. That's why you're so good at that. And it's helping the brain find that evidence to search all of that information out. So it's so important to go down the growth mindset rather than the limiting beliefs, because these kids hear so much negativity that they're very negative and they get stuck in those limiting beliefs. So we need to change that to that growth mindset. So some questions you can ask some children. At the end of this, I'll give you an example of how it works, because this can be a little bit overwhelming with how is that going to work for our children in our room. And it actually really does. And these are not the be-all and end-all questions. That obviously you'll dig down deeper into these. And they really do work. And by me giving the example at the end of it, it'll show you how it all sort of comes together. So bear with me. So you can say things like, I've noticed whatever's happened. You know, I've noticed you're not doing, you know, I've noticed that you're struggling with this, or I've noticed that you and little Jimmy had an argument over at lunchtime, or something like that. What's up? What's happening? What's going on? Never ask why. They don't know why. It's just a reaction to what they're doing and what's happening. Chances are it's just something that's been done, so they don't really know why. By asking what's up, what's happening, what's going on, what's that about, something like that, it's making the brain think a little differently. Because by saying why, I don't know, but what's up or what's happening, you still might get the I don't know, but there's a little bit more there that the brain's going, oh, hang on, I need to answer this differently. So it's important to state what you've seen and then ask what's happening. Don't dismiss the answer. So don't say, oh, well, I don't like that either, we just have to deal with it. So really acknowledge that answer and run with it. You know, let them voice their opinion and see what they're feeling, what they're hearing, and really get an understanding of it. As we say in the coaching world, be curious, ask the questions, understand what's happening for them, and see how they're processing this. Ask open questions, so no yes or no answers. So don't allow them to say yes or no. So things like, how was your day at school? I don't know. Did you have a good day at school? No. So those sorts of things. Asking those questions that I have to give you an answer. So things like, you know, what did you do at school today? That's better than how was your day at school, or yeah, what did you do at school? Sorry, I've lost it now. How was your day at school, or did you like school today, or something like that? It's always going to be no anyway. Ask questions to find out more and break it down. As what I said before, get curious, find out what's going on for them. Really, really ask what's going on and what's happening. Define the problem to what you believe it is. So define, this is what you're hearing. So this is all coaching stuff. This is the sort of stuff we do in coaching. So when they tell you what the problem is, going back to them and say, okay, well, this is how I heard you say that. So you have, let's say he's got into an altercation with someone in the playground. So, okay, well, I hear that you didn't like what that child was doing, and you didn't believe that that's the way it should be happening, and is that right? And they'll come back and say, yeah, he wasn't doing that right, or something like that. So really define that back to them, and it gives a sense of, oh, you're listening to me. And it's also helping you clarify, obviously, what they're saying and what the problem was as well. And ask them what the solution may be, and work with them to see what they come up with. So really, really do this. It's quite interesting, this one. Basically, they might come up with a completely different answer to what you think it should be. And run with their answer, as long as it's not ridiculous. Well, not when I say ridiculous, even if it is ridiculous, run with it and let them work out that it's not going to work. But if it's dangerous, obviously not. We have to sort of build around that. But let them run with their own solution. And it really helps them down the track to help them problem solve these things in the future. So a quick example of this is when my son was, I think he was in year 1, he got sent home. So, you know, year 1 is still fairly young, and we did this process with him. So he got sent home from school because he had hit a child, punched a child, which obviously isn't appropriate. So there was a consequence of behaviour. The school put in a consequence. I put in a consequence when he got home. But I knew I needed to work out why he behaved in this way. So when we got home, we didn't do it in the car because I knew it was an important conversation. I sat down with him and I said, okay, you were sent home from school because you punched a child. What's going on with that? And he said, well, he was annoying me. I said, okay, right, so that child was annoying you. Can you tell me a little bit about how he was annoying you? So I'm getting right into what was going on for him. And he said, well, I was lying down in the undercover area, and this boy came over to me and asked me if I was all right. So he annoyed me. So I turned around and I punched him. And I went, okay, so you were lying down in the undercover area, and he was annoying you because he just asked you to if you were okay. And he said, yeah, I just wanted to be left alone. And I went, okay, all right, so you wanted to be left alone. I said, but when that boy came over to you, did you tell him, you know, was there anything about that you told him that you wanted to be left alone so he would? And he said, no, I didn't tell him that. I just told him, you know, I just punched him and hoped he went away. So we got into it a bit more, and I said, okay, so what is something you may have been able to do? No, I said, why are you lying down in the undercover area anyway? What made you lie down? Were you hurt or what? And he said, well, I was tired. And I went, okay, all right, you were tired. That's so not what I thought. I don't know what I was thinking. And I said, well, put yourself in a child's shoes. If you saw someone lying down in the undercover area and you're on the other side, what would you have done? And he said, well, I would have been worried that they would have been hurt, and I would have gone over and checked. And all of a sudden you saw the penny drop, and he goes, oh. So straight away he's already acknowledged that that other child just wanted to see if he was all right. So it's already those neural pathways are starting to go, hang on, maybe I could have done that differently. So then once I've seen that penny drop and him acknowledge that, yeah, it probably wasn't the best thing to do, we then worked on why he was lying down in the undercover area. So I said to him, so what made you lie down in the undercover area? And he said, I was tired. And I said, okay. I said, well, what's something you could have done instead as opposed to going lying down in the undercover area? And he said, what I thought was that he could have gone to the sick bay, he could have gone to the library and been quiet in there or something like that. That was my thinking. His thinking was completely different to mine, and he actually came up and he said, well, I could just go to bed earlier the night before. And I was like, okay, that's totally not what I expected him to say, but let's run with that, because this was a solution that he was going down. So I went, okay, well, how can we get you into bed earlier the night before? So then we went through some, and I won't go into too much more detail, but we went into some strategies that we could use to get into bed earlier the night before. And he came up with those strategies, and they worked for a little while, and of course they faded out because he didn't want to go to bed, but that's different. But in the end, the whole moral of the story is asking those questions around that scenario. So yes, of course, we spoke about the action on punching the child, which isn't appropriate, but what led up to that, and asking those questions that led up to that to find out how we can work with a solution so that scenario doesn't happen again. So it's getting that detail around some certain scenarios. So where to from here? So I've got some teacher resources that you are quite welcome to jump on my website and download. You'll get some over each of the 5 days that will help you through and sort of elaborate a lot more on what we've spoken about here. And you can implement them into the classroom, which will help. Of course, you can always email me and ask me for any tips or anything like that as well. So you're quite welcome to jump over to the website and download those. So the first day will come through pretty much straight away for you, and then you'll get them over the next 5 days as well. If you wanted to take it one step further, so yeah, those resources are free, obviously. If you wanted to take it one step further, I am writing a course at the moment with a psychologist who specialises in ASD, and obviously my specialty is ADHD. And it's specifically designed for early learning, more so the daycare centre environment, but you would certainly benefit if you're a prep teacher or maybe even a year 1 as well, because it's setting up the classroom and the rooms and all of that for success. So as I said, it's written by a psychologist who specialises in ASD, and then of course myself. So this course covers what is ADHD and ASD exactly, the communication with parents. So we go more into the role playing. We show more about a conversation with the parents. So it's a bit more than what we're doing here tonight, and really getting into how different scenarios will work with parents. The parents that don't want to know about it, parents that want to know maybe just enough to get them by, and really, really cooperative parents as well. So we go into all of that, show you role-playing examples and videos, all of that. This is all done online. Observation skills, so what you can use to make it better to give reports to specialists and parents and things like that, and what you can be doing to make it easier for you as well. Some strategies you can put in place for the centre, and then some student-specific strategies as well, and then some red zone strategies also. So doing things that are sort of completely crazy and you just need to get stuff done. That should be ICP now, I realise that. I thought I had changed that. Behaviour plans and summaries, so things around that as well. And we'll meet the professional standards for teachers, and you get a certificate for that, so you can use them for your PD points and things like that. So that is usually $397 for 2 participants, but of course for conference, for you guys tonight, it's $297 for 2 participants. So if you're interested in that, just flick me an email. You've got my website address now. You can just do it on the contact form there, and we can sort that out. I can get an invoice out to your centres or your schools, whoever's going to pay for that. And then once that's up, so that should be released in the next month or so. And then once that's up, you'll get an email from us saying, yep, we're good to go, and you can start that. It's all done online for you, and there's it's a course, a proper course over 7 weeks, and you get testing at the end of it and all that sort of thing as a result of the certificate, of course. So that's about it for me tonight. There's ways you can contact me, and thank you very much for listening to me, and I open the floor to any questions you might have. Anyway, just type away if you've got any questions. If you don't want to ask a question here, you can certainly email me for any specific questions that you might want to ask about a particular student. I'm always open, and I always offer as well a 15-minute chat for free anyway, so we can tee up a phone call that we can have a chat on for 15 minutes if you wanted to speak with me about a specific student and get some strategies around them. So yeah, so well, thanks very much, guys. Really lovely. I'm glad I could help. I'm very passionate about ADHD, so I love doing these talks so I can really help these kids. It's all about the kids for me.
Thank you to Paula for your presentation, and thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. This webinar has been recorded and will be available in the Members Center of the ECTA website in the next few days. Also, registrations are now open via www.ecta.org.au for the next webinar and conference. Please stay logged in to take our short in-room survey, which should be on your screen now. Also, to download tonight's participant certificate, please click on the folder on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We thank you in advance for your feedback and wish you a lovely evening.